Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. My name is Nick Zulovich, part of the team at Cherokee Media Group, and grateful you have made time for our session titled Mastering Demand Insights, How Buyer Propensity Shapes Pricing and Promotions, featuring Fabian Mackin, who is Senior Vice President and Chief Customer Officer with Lot Links. Before we get into the presentation, just a couple of quick items to mention. We are recording today's session, so keep watch of your inbox for a link to that recording so you can review the information and share it with your colleagues. And if you have a question, please use the chat function here on the Zoom platform, and we'll get to those questions after Fabian's presentation. So that's more than enough for me. Let's get right to our expert, Fabian Mackin of Lot Links, for our presentation, Mastering Demand Insights, How Buyer Propensity Shapes Pricing and Promotions. Fabian, welcome. Thank you for the time today.
Hey, Nick, great to be with you. I appreciate you inviting us to participate in this, and I'm looking forward to interacting with everybody that's on the webinar today and hopefully giving you some insights that can help you improve your business as we move ahead. So I'm going to start by just talking a little bit about today. I think that I've been around this business for quite some period of time. I feel like everybody is pretty well aware that the consumer journey has changed in a significant way over the last 20 years or so. But I want to highlight something that I'm not sure that people really think a lot about, which is the expectation of the customer based on the changes in their journey. So I think we all know that a huge number of people that are going to research buying a car, or for that matter, any kind of product at all, are doing that research online. And I think that we all know that, as a general rule, when people are doing their research, there are different phases that they're going through. But I would argue that one of the things that I believe is oftentimes overlooked is the expectation of the client based on some of the other things that they do. And maybe the easiest way for me to explain that is thinking about Amazon. So I was talking to a client of ours the other day, and we were just talking about researching, buying things online. And, he related a story to me, which was about a doorstop. And, what he said is that he had a door in the store that, was affected pretty significantly by other doors in the store opening and closing. And he needed to find a doorstop for the thing. So his first thought was to send a porter down to the local hardware store and pick up a doorstop. But, it took him about 12 seconds to figure out, oh, no, maybe I'll just get on my phone and go to Amazon. And he got onto Amazon and literally was able to get a doorstop delivered to the store within about the next 2 hours, same day delivery. And what he suggested to me was that sort of expectation that each and every one of us have based on what we do in our regular day-to-day life about how we engage with looking, researching for a product, and then actually getting that product is something that he believes is crafting kind of the expectation of the consumer with respect to the retail automotive space as well. And so I would argue that he's right. I would also argue that when we're thinking about the behavior of the consumer and how not only is it being crafted by their ability to get insight, get information, but it's also crafted by the expectation they have about how they're going to get that information and how, it's going to affect their ability to, make a decision about what they're going to buy or not is a pretty big piece of the puzzle. As the slide is pointing out, consumers are more and more expecting a seamless experience from what they see when they're doing their shopping and research to what actually happens when they hit the showroom floor. And I think that, it's really important, not only that we're using that to kind of put plans into place about how we're going to market digitally, but that our staff is really up to speed on what the expectations of the consumer are and how we're going to meet those where they want to be met. And I think without question, personalizing these messages and identifying where that customer is in the journey and how that's going to affect the sort of message that we want to put into play with everybody is going to be really an important part of what we do. So what I would talk about here is a little bit about how to master online advertising. And, I think that term in and of itself is a little bit scary because, there are certainly a lot of avenues and channels that one can pursue. But I think that the important piece of the puzzle is to really remember that it all begins with the customer. And every single one of the customers that we hope to connect with might be at a different place along their journey. They might be, having different needs and wants along the path that they're trying to pursue. And, I think it begins in a lot of ways with understanding what the customer actually looks like. And I think in and of itself, trying to use human intelligence to achieve that objective is a bit of a challenge. I know that I have the opportunity to talk in some pretty robust conversations with dealers across the country all day, every single week, for a long, long period of time. And I think we would all agree that to some extent or another, the limitations that we have or the biases and the preconceived notions about what is and what isn't with respect to customers can, affect the outcomes that we're trying to achieve in a big way. And, I say this a lot. I work in a company that, leverages machine learning, artificial intelligence. And, what I've learned over a period of time is that eventually the machines will win. And when I say that, I don't mean to say that in a way that, suggests that people like us that are on this call are not going to have a place in the future. But, machines are unemotional. Machines are very rational. Machines can do things with a level of precision and accuracy that oftentimes the human isn't going to be able to achieve. They don't take days off. They don't get sick. They don't have, good days and bad days. They just sort of relentlessly execute the sort of things that they can do and interpret data in a way that probably in some ways is a little less biased and superior to what we can achieve. I think the important piece is to really understand how to leverage that data and interpret it. And, frankly, it's an evolution. What we see going on today is probably different than we saw going on during COVID. And it's certainly probably different than pre-COVID. And so I think using data analytics, using AI in a way that can help you kind of achieve better outcomes is a critical piece of the puzzle. And I would also argue that things that we might not necessarily be capable of considering, such as, when the customer is going to be online looking for a specific kind of message, or, how weather or other economic conditions might come into play that could affect, how we want to deliver that message, are critical to understand. And again, with all due respect to all of us that have made a living doing this for a very long time and expect to continue to do that, I think combining what I think of as HI, human intelligence, with AI, which is the knowledge and insight these machines can help us interpret data, is going to be a critical piece of the puzzle. So let's talk a little bit about that journey. And I think that, at any given time, what we see looking at consumer demand is that demand varies specific to, each individual VIN or a brand or a model within that brand. Potentially some of the things that are going on, outside influences. There's this little thing going on called an election coming up next week, can influence some of these key steps along the way. But each customer also has a different path or journey. And, what I'd like to talk a little bit about is how to connect the dots between where that customer is on their journey and the messaging and the sort of marketing that we want to do. I think, not everybody's in the game looking for a car at any given time. We want to appeal to those that are, because that's what butters the bread today. but we also want to maintain kind of that branding and awareness that can connect with people that are in this beginning part over here where they're either in casual interest or not necessarily actively involved with specifically shopping for a particular kind of car, but they would like to have some messaging related to, them having an interest in cars overall, or them having kind of a cursory interest in a specific kind of vehicle like an EV or a hybrid that they don't have the level of awareness that they had in the past. And we want to kind of make a way to connect with those customers across that journey so that when they are more low funnel and ready to pull the trigger on doing something, they are already connected with us and we have an opportunity to, kind of go through that channel and send the right message at the right moment in time. So let's talk a little bit about that. I think when we think about interpreting signals and buyer trends, again, once that customer gets beyond that, I'm sort of thinking about doing something to I'm getting a little more serious. There are different parts along the path that they take to get to the dealership that, probably require a little different thinking. So in the beginning of that process, if I wake up today and say, I'm thinking about buying a car, but I've got a lot of questions to answer, things like, what's my budget? What kind of car best kind of meets my needs? Am I looking for an SUV? Do I want a compact SUV or a midsize one? Is, safety or gas mileage or reliability an important consideration for me? They're doing a lot of research across the marketplace in a lot of different places. It's important that when they're trying to figure out what car or what category of car that we think might make sense, that we attack that customer with the right kind of message at that moment in time. So that requires leveraging maybe more than one resource. As I'm talking to dealers across the country, what I hear a lot is that, from an ease standpoint, it sounds great on paper to have one resource that can help you assist or engage with these people across the board. But in practical application, that's not always so easy. In other words, when you think about how to connect with a customer when they're in that beginning part of the phase and, what message you want to send, that might require utilizing your CRM. It might require you utilizing a marketing agency to come up with the right sort of messaging to connect to the customer through the CRM. More and more of my clients are using CDPs and other resources to try to identify and segment the different people in the game that they have the ability to connect with in a way that's going to make sense to the consumer. Once they start to figure out, like, as an example, I'm looking for an SUV and I'm looking for an SUV in a specific price point, there are other channels that might make sense. Obviously everybody's familiar with the marketing portals where people are able to shop you against every other dealer in the marketplace and begin to zero in on, which cars might fit into my wheelhouse from a standpoint of I'm looking for a compact SUV at the $30,000 price point. But then it's also going back to some of the places where they might get a little unbiased information with respect to, what kind of review this car gets, what the reliability of this car is. And again, how we connect those messaging components between looking at reviews, looking at price points, identifying what kind of a budget that I'm looking at, things like, what's my trade worth? As everybody's keenly aware of, the customers are now more aware of what their cars are probably worth because they have the ability to get some input, not just at the dealer website level, but also through a variety of resources out there, where they can get a pretty good cash offer and have a pretty clear understanding of what they're going to get for their car. Those things are going to influence, again, the sort of messaging and the approach that we want to take as we're connecting with these customers, both online and when they hit the store. And I think what's important is that as we go from what am I looking for? Is it a good car? Can I afford it? Who's got that car and where should I buy it? To am I getting the right deal and buying the car? We craft each one of these kind of places along the journey in an effective way, not just digitally, but as I said in the beginning, making sure that our staff is keenly aware that along that way, we probably want to communicate with them if we're doing it via text, telephone, in person, online, via email, in a way that's going to make sense to them. And we want to make sure that we're answering the questions that the customer might not even necessarily know that they should be asking ahead of them, getting to that point where they're trying to make some of those really important decisions about which place they're going to buy a car. So this slide should give you a little bit more insight about, what that might look like as we walk along those different places throughout their journey. So as an example here, if I've got a customer that's kind of not necessarily ready to pull the trigger on doing some intense shopping, or they know that they are going to be ready to make a move, but it's going to be more in the future, the type of messaging that I might want to talk about there is more related to branding, or maybe it's the new models that kind of fit into the wheelhouse of the car that they're looking to replace, or upcoming models that might be in play that, as they get a little closer to their lease coming up, would be available and could potentially be an option for them to look at. Versus when we get down here and we're looking at, I'm ready to pull the trigger on a car, what I probably want to focus on there is, the ease of purchase and making sure that I'm effectively communicating that, I'm using sophisticated technology to price my inventory. And the reason that they might be interested to begin with is because I'm scouring the marketplace. I'm keenly aware of what's going on with the standpoint of price. And the reason this offer looks so good isn't by accident. I think the VDP page at that point becomes really relevant. And what I'm starting to see is more and more dealers, figuring out a way to not just give the basic information on the VDP page, but things that go beyond the basics. It's a given, obviously, that you got to have great pictures and a compelling description and accurate information, but making sure that the consumer is able to ascertain that not only do you have the pertinent information about the car that's going to get them excited, but you're providing pertinent information about you that, is related to how easy it's going to be able to make that deal and begin to execute some of the processes that take a lot of time in the dealership online and sort of get some of that stuff out of the way. And that, when they actually do come into the dealership, we're going to utilize that in an effective manner to make sure that we don't make them start from scratch again. And again, I think that, most of the stores that I'm talking to that are pretty dialed into this sort of thought process and the methodology required to make that happen are, using different resources along the way to ensure that the right message and the right, kind of information is getting to the customer, and really confirming with the interactions that they're having and, the way that they're seeing success or not seeing success as to whether or not what they're doing is actually working. And I guess, I'm a little biased with this because, my background is in retail operations, and, now for the last long time in the performance management aspect of this business is making sure that you're relying on people in the partners that you choose to give you the right kind of data and analysis, and then also to give you suggestions about what some of these gaps in the data might mean about the way you're going to market and where some of the pitfalls of what you're doing right now are, and how you can improve and kind of craft and fine tune a little better effective approach with some of that stuff. I want to talk a little bit about, some of the effect of what we do at Lot Links. So we recently put together a case study with one of our partners, Lake Auto Group. And, these guys were struggling with, trying to figure out how to maximize margin and to increase the turn of their inventory. And what we see, in the conversations that we have is that's a pattern that's kind of become more and more prevalent across the market as, we've gotten out of this COVID period where, let's face it, we could sort of get away with doing almost whatever the heck we wanted to and be successful to where we are today, which is, an environment where we're seeing inventory starting to relax, specifically for sure on the new car side, and maybe even a little more so on the used car side, and that it requires a more, precise way of trying to attack the price without impacting margins. And so, when we initiated our partnership with these guys, there were a couple things that we put into play that really had a pretty nice effect on helping these guys achieve those objectives. One of which is our product called Showroom. So we know that most shoppers today are shopping on a mobile device. And what we also know is a lot of the dealers that we have on our platform have an optimized desktop website, but in some cases, what's happening on the desktop isn't aligned actually with what the consumer's experience is on a mobile app. So we designed a product called Showroom. It's an enhanced VDP landing page that's really designed to streamline the customer's experience and make it really easy for them to connect with the dealer through a call to action, such as click to text, click to call, click to submit a lead form and ask some questions. What we also know is that, we have a fairly unique piece of technology in that we actually observe somewhere around 12 to 13 million consumer VDP views across the marketplace every single day. And we tune our machine to identify the behavior of the shopper to zero in on people that are really more along that place in the journey that suggests they're ready to pull the trigger on a car. When we combine the methodology that the machine is using to connect people that are looking for a specific kind of car, behaving in specific kind of way, and we make it really easy for them to connect with the dealership, it has a pretty powerful impact. With these guys, between the combination of net new shoppers that we're able to connect their inventory to and the ease of utilization on the showroom tool, we saw an increased shopper conversion rate to 2.5%. And, when I talk to dealers across the country, I'm oftentimes seeing, providers that would be very recognizable having conversion rates in the less than 0.5% range. So as you can probably imagine, if you can accelerate that by 4 or 5 times, it's going to make a big impact on your ability to actually move a car. After 1 month, these guys brought their average age of their inventory from 35 days to 24. And as you can imagine, for those of you that are involved with the actual execution of, coming up with a pricing strategy and maintaining your, position in the marketplace in a competitive environment, if you can shave 11 days off of the time that it takes to move a car, it's very impactful. I know that as we look at dealers across the country, depending on the brand and the environment that they're in, on average, dealers are making pricing adjustments every 3 to 7 days. And what we see is those adjustments are continuing to increase. But certainly we see on the used car side, those can vary anywhere between 300 and 700 bucks a whack. And what I would argue is if you could avoid maybe even one, if not 2 or 3 of those adjustments, 11 days has a meaningful impact on your overall profitability. And certainly on a used car, where we've returned to a little more of a depreciating environment with respect to the value of these cars. And we're also sitting in a position where we've seen that the average price point of a used car is, higher than it has been in the past. That can make a very real difference to the bottom line in the store. So what can the right data do? Well, I would argue this: it can do almost everything. having the right kind of information is going to really impact your ability, anybody's ability to make better decisions. Having the right kind of information around predictive analysis of what's going to happen, as we probably all heard, watching where the puck is going to go instead of where it is going to radically improve your profitability. I would for sure say that if you're in a position where you don't have software or insight that's going to give you the ability to not just predict, but see what consumer demand looks like today on a VIN by VIN basis, there's a good probability you're impacting, your ability to succeed and win in a big way. And I think as we continue to move forward, obviously, when you think about AI and the impact that it's having, in a lot of different areas, the gap between the dealers that are really in a position to be able to use that sort of data and the dealers who are not is going to continue to get wider. And I think what's interesting about the AI component of things is the gap is going to be a lot more rapidly increasing than it would have been if we were using HI instead of AI. So, I would say that the dealers that I have the opportunity to visit with that are seeing the best results right now are going to continue to see improved results. And the dealers that I have an opportunity to visit with that are maybe seeing some challenges in today's world and not in a position to leverage that kind of data and insight are going to probably, unfortunately, get themselves into a situation where that's going to become an even wider gap. So, I would strongly encourage you to, ask some hard questions about some of the partners that you have about their ability to provide that level of insight to do a little better job of, not just telling you what's going on today, but where they think the puck is actually going to be moving. Because if you're not doing that, I foresee things are going to continue to be a little more challenging as time goes by. That's all I got, Nick.
Excellent, wonderful presentation to say the least from Fabian Mackin, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Customer Officer with Lot Links. And if you have a question for Fabian in the time we have remaining, please just use the chat function here on the Zoom platform and we'll share it with him. Outstanding anecdote that you shared at the beginning of your presentation about the getting the doorstop off of Amazon and just getting on a phone and a couple of thumb presses and there it is. But just kind of 10,000 foot view of the car business nowadays, maybe some other interactions that you've had with dealerships nowadays, Fabian. Just how difficult is that balance of the customer who wants that Amazon experience to go from a smartphone or shopping at home and really have a digital retail experience has been bandied about for some time and still have customers who want to walk into this showroom floor, get behind the wheel, take a test drive, perhaps have some negotiations with the dealership. We'll put it politely that way. Just how is that wide spectrum that dealerships face nowadays a real challenge out there?
Well, I mean, it for sure is a real challenge. And I would argue in a lot of ways, Nick, what we're talking about is the difference between the expectation of the client based on, other interactions that they have across the space, not necessarily related to automotive, like I talked about with Amazon as an example, and the experience that they have when they, show up on the show floor or they text or call. And I think that really is related to ensuring that our team has the level of awareness that they should about exactly where the customer is on that journey. And, there's a lot of ways that you can train people to become better at that. Certainly, I would argue that, it's a lot of, day-to-day practical, let's talk about this situation or that scenario as we're talking to live customers. But I would argue that it's actually way beyond that. I think that as a dealer, if we're not practicing and, drilling and rehearsing, the different sorts of consumer interactions that are likely going to occur today, tomorrow, next week on the regular, and making sure that our team is up to speed on, how they should interact with these people, where they are in that phase of the journey, you're just going to get left behind. I mean, more and more, the expectation of the consumer is, I want it and I want it the way I want it and I want it now. And, if we're not aware of where they are in that journey, in the kind of communication that we're having, what we're going to end up doing is having these scenarios where the customer is here, but we think they're here, and we don't do a very effective job of identifying that we're wrong. And we end up sending some signals to the customer that just make it pretty apparent to them that we don't have our ducks in a row, and we can't have that.
Again, the special expert for our webinar today, Mastering Demand Insights, how biopropensity shapes promotions and other parts of auto retailing nowadays, is Fabian Mackin, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Customer Officer with Lot Links. And Fabian, to your point that you just referenced, as well as toward the end of your presentation, especially for dealerships or dealership groups that might have some sort of outside marketing agency or platform or service provider, whatever the case may be, what maybe should the dealership be asking? What might be the specific questions they should ask of that agency or service provider to learn more about where the customer might be on their journey, as you just referenced? What might be some good questions to ask to find that data and intel that's so valuable and needed nowadays?
Yeah, Nick, I think what's important is that we understand the capabilities of that marketing partner to really connect with customers at those different points along the journey, and how they are able to assist us with customizing those messages. In other words, it's a really different part of the puzzle when I'm talking to that customer. It's got the casual interest or is maybe thinking about something, but it's a little further down the road than it is a customer who's spent 12, 15 hours already doing the research and knows exactly what they want, and is now really expecting that we're going to, again, make it easy for them to get that. If I'm sending a mixed message, in other words, if I'm sending a really kind of low funnel, I'm ready to pull the trigger on a car message to that person that's got casual interest, versus, kind of a big picture, here are some of the options that might be available to you. We're the kind of place that you want to come to. Maybe it's got a little more fixed op kind of messaging around it, and we're not able to customize those things. We might be, missing out on opportunities, or, alienating clients who would consider doing business with us because we don't have that sort of customized messaging and capability. And so I think putting people on the spot and asking them, what their thoughts are on some of this stuff is oftentimes a pretty good place to start. And then really understanding how, as time goes by, evaluating the success or effectiveness of those messages, and how we can improve some of that through the utilization of machines is also a really important piece of the puzzle. And I feel like it's important for us to all be accountable. If we're gonna be good partners with anybody, we gotta be frank and honest about what the capabilities that we have are and how we can help.
Closing moments here on our webinar featuring Fabian Mackin, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Customer Officer with Lot Links. And you can connect with Fabian and the rest of the team at their company website, lotlinks.com, to connect with service representatives and learn more about their tools and offerings that Lot Links can offer dealerships of all sizes. And Fabian, just to wrap us up, we're here in the closing quarter and weeks and days and months here of 2024, and the new year will be here soon enough. Just What's piquing your interest in the car business in general, be it retail or, as you mentioned, fixed ops and the service drive? Just what's catching your attention to watch as we wind down the year, going into the next year? What are you curious to see how things unfold?
Well, that's a pretty big question. I would say that, what I'm really interested in is what I hear my clients saying that they're very interested in is how is the impact of the cars that weren't built over the course of the pandemic, 2020, 2021, 2022, going to, affect the used car market. You and I were talking ahead of the webinar about how that gap between the average price of a new vehicle and the average price of a used vehicle is greater than it's ever been before. And I suggested to you that my anticipation is that's going to continue to get wider because, we all know that they build about 4 million less cars each one of those calendar years than they had in the past. And those cars aren't coming out of the woodwork anytime soon. How's that going to impact not just what's going to go on in the used car environment, but with the new car environment as well? And then, obviously, depending on your brand, there's some brands that are really in great shape out there. And, they've got a limited amount of supply and consequently are not having to, spend a lot of money on incentives. But we've got some other brands that certainly are at the opposite end of that spectrum. And, it'll be interesting to see as we move ahead in 2025 how those brands react to some of that issue because I think we all know that some of those brands where there's a really high supply of cars and maybe not the demand that matches that, put dealers into a very tough environment for sure.
That's Fabian Mackin, Senior Vice President and Chief Customer Officer with Lot Links. Fabian, thank you for taking us through some of the intricacies of customer behavior nowadays and how Lot Links can be of assistance. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good talking to you again, Nick. Thank you.
Same here, same here. And thank you so much for joining us for the webinar. On behalf of all of us at Cherokee Media Group, we thank you for joining us and we look forward to having you again next time.